You are listening to Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls, a podcast where three women discuss horror movies from the silent era through the 1970s. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify, and Anchor. Timely, topical, terrifying.
Good. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Girls, Ghosts, Ghouls. Tonight, we're going to discuss Rosemary's Baby. And with that, Betsy.
Trigger warning. This episode contains mention of sexual assault, rape, gaslighting, and other abusive behavior, as well as righteous indignation from opinionated women. You have been warned. If any of these things are a problem for you, maybe just don't check this one out.
And don't watch the movie.
And do not watch the movie.
Or read the book.
Nope.
With that being said, another note to make about this, and since we have our trigger warning price, so Roman Polanski was the director on this, and Roman Polanski is a piece of shit. He raped a 13-year-old girl about 10 years after this movie. He drugged her, did whatever he wanted with her, and then he spent very little time in jail and then fled the country and has not been back to the United States since. And he was not kicked out of the academy until sometime in the 2000s, I believe.
Very recently.
And, yeah, like the late 2000s, and the rape occurred in the 70s. So, yeah, I guess white privilege is a real thing for sure, huh? So keep that in mind. And when you watch the movie, it kind of might make you more aware of how creepy and horrible and just terrible the whole thing is.
Oh.
And the fact that a rapist shot it, or a future rapist, but I will guess that probably was not the first time he committed such a crime, because usually it's not a one-shot deal. And try to breathe. So,
it adds a level of unfortunate irony to the film.
And total creeptitude.
Yeah. So, interesting random points. The writer of the book, I forgot his name, Ira something.
Ira
Levine
Levine
said that this was probably one of the most faithful book to movie adaptations he'd ever seen. And they theorized it might have been because at that time, Roman Polanski did not feel that he had never done a book to movie adaptation. So therefore, he probably didn't feel that he could tear it apart and do whatever the hell he wanted with it. So he stayed as faithful as he could to the book because he thought he had to, which in my opinion is good, because yeah. And I also wanted to note, so earlier in the year, Rebecca was the one who pointed out that she would love to do Rosemary's Baby. So this is her pick. I'm the one who thought that we should do it now because it was following the horrible overturning of Roe versus Wade. And this movie kind of highlights how women are treated in misogyny and
and the loss of control.
Absolutely.
Brief summary, young couple, Rosemary's the wife. She is a housewife. They're young. They're starting out in the family. The husband is a working but not successful actor, which is very interesting to say that he has jobs that he's been doing, but he's not breaking through. He's not a big name. He might be that person you see in commercials and background, but you never really know. They move into an apartment that's out of their price range. They meet up with their neighbors, are part of a Satan cult, as well as with other people in the building and outside of the building. They, of course, or especially Rosemary, is not aware of this. Her husband becomes aware, realizes that he can use this to his advantage by joining up with them so he can get that extra special push to break through and become a great star. And the price for that is basically he gets to participate and let his wife be raped so that she can have the devil's baby. And that's the pretty much short synopsis of what happens.
Yeah. That pretty much sums it up.
So a lot of creep in this.
It's what I would call realistic horror, because I mean, with the aspect of that, I don't actually think there's a devil, that the whole thing could happen.
Yeah.
You know,
Satan's baby aside.
Everything else is
very, very,
that's a good way to put it.
Yes.
Because it does happen. You know, one of the main themes that you can look at in the movie is a complete loss of control of the main character. And everything seems to cascade from there. How she basically is this passive role throughout the movie, because every time she tries to assert herself, she gets figuratively beaten down.
Yeah.
And if she
It's
doesn't have,
definitely
and if she doesn't have like the wherewithal to stand against it, like some of us would, if we wouldn't put up with that shit, you know, it becomes harder and harder for her to stand up.
so it's very classic abusive situation. So when we say, you know, and that's kind of like a counterpoint I would make. We like to think we would have the wherewithal to stand up to it, but then you have to, when you're in it, it's hard to know that that's it, because abusers are really good. Like, again, taking over that control, manipulating you into thinking that you're wrong, or that you're just not understanding them correctly. Or if you just wait a little longer, things will smooth out, or their behavior is justified because reason X, which in the movie is often because he's preoccupied with this new role. It's a very difficult part. So that's why he's not treating her quite right. You know, it's,
or my ever favorite one, you're too sensitive.
The scene
Who's heard that one? Yeah.
The scene that pointed this out the hardest to me was when she was eating the chocolate mousse and she felt like it had an aftertaste. And he says, "Nothing's ever good enough for you, is it?"
Oh, yeah.
always something. Kind of,
something with you. It's always something with you. Nothing's ever good enough for you. And she's like, "Fine, I'll eat the stupid mousse." And he's like, "No, you don't have to eat the mousse. It's fine. It's just like everything else." And so she eats the stupid mousse. And of course, it's drugs.
Yeah.
But
to be fair, she tries to hide it. She gets him to turn around. So she's eaten a lot of it. And then she dumps the rest of it into the napkin in her lap. So she's trying, you know, to sneak, which the whole fact that she felt compelled that she had to hide that she's not eating it to make this work. So this was interesting, because this whole scene was very interesting, because this was their baby making night. So he had been apparently very hard on her. Like, they don't really go into the movie exactly what he's doing. There's just these little hints. But, you know, there's a scene where she's talking to their old friend Hutch, and you know, she's not happy, and he can tell, and she makes excuses for her husband about how he's preoccupied with the role. And then, like, shortly thereafter, the husband comes in and it's like, "You know, I know I've been bad to you. It's terrible. It's all me. It's me. I'm horrible. Let's make a baby. Let's have a baby."
Yeah, the love bombing.
Yeah, it was super creepy about it too. And I'm not saying there aren't sensitive men out there that might know their women's, you know, cycle, their partner's cycle to a T. But he has circled on the calendar where her fertility dates is, knows exactly when her period, like shit that you know he didn't know before. Like, somebody helped him.
Yeah, like what kind of guy is gonna notice this stuff
on
the regular? God, yeah, that's true. I didn't
not be able to
factor in the time
prior, but then all of a sudden he knows.
Mm-hmm.
He makes a decision and suddenly he knows when everything is happening for her. Like, that's weird. That's just weird.
Like, I'm sure Minnie told him, because there's that whole scene where they come over when she was trying to avoid them, and they talk about how, you know, she mentions it's her first day. So, like, Minnie, which is one of the safest neighbors, probably mapped it out and told the husband to go do this. But
here are the likely days, you know, based on her own experience.
Rhythm method count, you know.
So, and that's just, you know, like another thing that adds to the level of creep factor in this movie, that I thought they did a good job of maintaining and building it throughout the movie.
Yeah, that was pretty much the peak of where they were going with it. I mean, it gets worse and worse out of it, but like this all leads up to the rape, which happens the same night as the chocolate mousse, which sort of levity to the situation. Like, I actually ended up having to put subtitles on a lot of Minnie's speeches, because especially the dream sequences, because I was never catching everything. And you know how when he comes in with the chocolate mousse to begin with, and he says, "Oh, whereas Minnie calls it the chocolate mouse." I thought he was just making fun of Minnie for years, you know, like just picking on her, like not that she'd actually call it chocolate mouse. Yeah, that's kind of
what I came across as.
But the scene, the rape scene, oddly enough, if you had the captions on, which sounds creepy, I apologize having captions on for the rape scene, but the whole cult is in Rosemary's bedroom when this happens. They're butt naked and chanting and summoning up the devil, while Rosemary is paralyzed and supposed to be completely out, but is actually just in a hallucinogenic dream state from the drugs and the chocolate mousse. And her husband at that point says, "I think she's awake. I think she's seeing this." And Minnie goes, "No, you fed her the chocolate mouse. She doesn't see anything. She don't hear anything. She's dead." So she actually did call it chocolate mouse. And I don't know why that makes this all just the more horrific and hilarious at the same time. Like, here's this woman who's conjuring up the fucking devil, and she's calling it chocolate mouse instead of mousse. And it's A
that
weird thing that gets stuck in
moment,
my brain, but it is.
yeah, it's that moment of absurdity in the middle of something utterly serious, and you're like, what? Now it's almost a little bit of a derailing.
Yeah.
Chocolate mouse. We're gonna
Chocolate
jump
mouse.
to chocolate mouse.
Although I do kind of appreciate that she's an eccentric lady, and she's an eccentric lady to her bones. And that's aside from her being part of this satanic witches, whatever it is. She's just an eccentric lady no matter what. Like, if she was divorced from all of this, she'd be a weirdo.
Part
So
of
I
me
think,
loves that. The fact that
right.
she actively participated in the rape of another woman means that she's a horrible, horrible human being. And makes me
Well,
sad because
I think she's a horrible human being as well for the constant craziness of the shoving into her life.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, but that's kind of all part of that.
Yeah.
see, the thing I think that really hit me like the hardest about this was that there were people who were trying to help Rosemary and who believed Rosemary, but then she was constantly being negged by everybody else in her life to the point that she's like, well, I just have to be crazy. And there's that moment in the phone booth when she's trying to call Dr. Hill, and she starts laughing and she's like, they're all in it. They're all part of the cult. They're all,
Yeah.
and she giggles. And you're like, okay, either she has completely snapped or this woman is the sanest she's ever been. And I think she's the sanest she's ever been. This is the sanest we've seen her in this movie. She knows what's happening right now. She is completely keyed in, and everybody's going to think she's crazy from now on because she's the sanest she's been.
And there she goes immediately into the second guessing herself afterwards.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and to be fair, that was kind of like, I thought that giggle was perfect because like not everybody does this, but I can say that when I've been in situations that have been so overwhelmingly like awful, horrific, just mind blowing, like, oh my God, this is really happening. A giggle pops out. Like that is how your body
And
sometimes will process it. It just is like,
and that's
like,
a really
what
normal
else is there to do
reaction
but
too.
laugh at this point? Another interesting point about this phone scene, since we brought it up. So the movie was actually produced by William Castle. Yes, the house on Haunted Hill, the Tingler, that William Castle. And which is freaking hilarious. Like I never put that together because of what William Castle's known for. And where normally you see William Castle sometimes take a role here and there in these movies, they didn't want him to because they didn't want his B-movie affiliation to take Rosemary's Baby down to that silly level. But his cameo does happen in this movie, and it is at the phone booth scene. He's the man standing outside the phone booth waiting to use the phone when Rosemary's in it.
Yeah, until I looked up some of the stuff on the movie, I didn't realize it was a Castle film until just this recently either. I looked it up. I'm like, oh my goodness. And it does throw you because you think of a Castle film and you think of a lot of camp involved. And there's no camp in this. It is just
serious film.
Straight up serious realistic horror.
I was gonna say it could be, but I hate to give any praise to Roman Polanski, so I'm not going to. However, this is a really well-directed film. There's a reason why it's a favorite for people. I understand why it's a favorite for people. It's well-directed, well-acted. The scenes are set up so beautifully. And even, like I said, even though she's a kooky, kitschy character, Minnie is never, what do I want to say, unrealistically kooky.
Yeah,
I agree. She's not out of the realm of possibility. I
would say, and none of the cult members are really, which is done really well because they're people you see every day on the street. You wouldn't expect. Like you didn't think Jim Jones was a bad guy until he had everybody drink the Kool-Aid. Well, before he had everybody drink the Kool-Aid, but you see my point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that too adds to the horror aspect because you think, oh, here's this perfectly normal person that is suddenly into this horrendous, awful thing. And your mind has to try to fit that into the narrative.
So yeah, and there's a lot of interesting stuff going on outside this movie that might have also played into the excellent acting and stuff that happened. So Mia Farrow, which I didn't realize this because I always associate Mia Farrow with Woody Allen. So this poor woman in reality has just a history of abusive relationships too. And I feel you, girl. But she was married to Frank Sinatra at the time when she started this movie. And apparently it was a huge point of contention. And Frank Sinatra said that she was spending and devoting too much time to this movie and it was affecting their marriage. And he wanted her to give it up. And then one of like either Polanski or possibly Capsule or somebody else with the film had told Mia Farrow that she's going to get an Oscar out of this. That's how great that this film and her in it is. So she soldiered on, and Sinatra had her served with papers on the set.
Yeah.
Now, I have a bit of a conspiracy theory about this, aside from the fact that I know Sinatra was not a great guy to begin with, another person that's not really known for being great with women for sure. In the movie, I'm not sure if it's in the book too, because I've never read the book, I'll be honest. The scene where Minnie and Laura Louise come over when Rosemary's trying to avoid being with the old people and spend time by herself. Rosemary's reading the book, which I believe is entitled Yes, I Can, which is Sammy Davis Jr.'s autobiography. And the interesting tie into this, which I think that they were kind of going for, is that Sammy Davis Jr. briefly was a member of the Church of Satan, the 1960s one that came out in California, not the Satanic Temple. Two different affiliations. They don't really like each other, not the same thing. And, Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., both in the Rat Pack. And I kind of think that amongst other things, one, Sinatra did not like the fact that he told her no, and she did it anyway. Two, I don't think he liked having his buddy who had this connection to the Church of Satan being pretty much sort of highlighted in a film about a satanic cult. And I think he was hoping to get it sort of
derailed, shut down
out of it, so there's not an additional connection. And I also wonder if he had something to do with her being basically just blunted by the Academy, because despite the fact that Mia Farrow won several other awards for her performance, she wasn't even nominated for an Academy Award for this film, not even on the running.
I don't know how much pull Sinatra would have with the Academy, because that's kind of two different things. Although he did have mob influences, so who knows? But
I don't. It's really a conspiracy theory, so it's very. Yeah. But yes, you're right. I don't know either. It's totally off the wall. My brain making patterns and connections.
But I could totally see that he would be like the connection with Sammy Davis Jr. about how that might influence his. You're taking too much time for this movie. Might be a convenient mix of situations.
It's totally awful. Yeah. So to note, so like it wasn't a very long time, and even if you wanted to stay with it forever, I don't care. There's actually several members of Hollywood elite that were members of the Church of Satan at that time, and it was rumored to be basically a big party. Yeah, it was supposed to be a big party thing, and rumored to have lots of orgies and all that. Sammy Davis Jr. admitted he had been part of it for a while, and that he had left when a party went awry. A lot of people insinuate from party orgy. And the level of awry is like when you use it to like, there's a little problem when it was like, you might be hiding a body. I don't know. Like it sounded like it was like really awry. But it's hard to find details on it. So I would love to hear that story.
Yeah, because the question is, if they're saying, oh, it went awry, which you think of maybe something small, like the food didn't show up or the booze ran out. Or
people said some mean things.
Maybe he's understating it. And yes, it's one of those situations of, oh shit, we have a body. What do we do now?
Again, complete off the wall conjecture, not based in fact anywhere, but
yeah,
I find it interesting.
Honestly, in Hollywood at that time, there were lots of parties where Natalie Wood never came back, or someone ended up dead in Superman's room. It was unfortunately fairly common at parties in that time for people to over party and things to happen. So
not out of the question.
No.
It's an interesting side fact that I couldn't I find that shit hilarious.
The situations where they're behind the camera life matches the movie and licentiousness.
So I guess we keep glossing it over. Maybe we should just talk about this. Like the whole movie is very traumatic to watch, especially if you're a woman, in my opinion. And there's other things that will amp the trauma of it. But so we mentioned the chocolate mousse mouse scene. So the whole idea is they're supposed to be having this lovely night together. It's the night that she's supposed to first be fertile, one of her first fertile days since they decided to make the baby. And an intimate dinner, which of course Minnie comes knocking on the door, and like at this point, Minnie and Roman, correct? Is the husband's name?
Roman is the husband's name. Yes.
Who had insinuated
yeah.
themselves into their lives so much at this point where it's like almost an everyday, every minute thing. They are pushing themselves in the house and adding themselves into their lives. And Rosemary, when the knock happens at the door and she hears it, it's Minnie, she's like, oh no, not tonight, not tonight. And is relieved that it's just, here's some dessert for your lovely dinner that, almost, and actually it was almost presented as if she didn't know this lovely dinner for baby making night was happening. She just happened to make some chocolate mousse and eat some,
Yeah.
And it isn't pushing her way in. And then there's that forced, you must eat the terrible chalky stuff, or else you're the bad person. You're making something of it. You're ruining our perfect night. She gets so affected. Like she might have ate possibly half the mousse, maybe.
Yeah, at best. Yeah,
That's being generous.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
she's, in the midst of cleaning up and, getting what she put into her napkin into the trash from the mousse. And she just starts getting woozy and lightheaded, dizzy. Her husband laughingly, oh, no more cocktail and wine for you. It's going to be cocktail or wine from now on. Knowing full well she's drugged and just playing it off. She falls over in the hallway. He picks her up, starts undressing her. She's like, and Rosemary's like mortified. She's like, oh, but baby night, I'm so sorry. And the husband's all like, oh, it's okay. We can do it in the morning or tomorrow. There's no worries. And then the next thing you know, she's passed out having this hallucinogenic dreams that she's a child back in whatever Catholic school she went to, hearing Minnie's voice through the nun and all those weird things happen about being bit by a mouse. And the whole cult is in there, butt naked in her room, chanting, painting on her body. And next thing you know, like it's hard to watch. I mean, it is so hard to watch. She's being raped. You see her sides get scraped and groped and by a sort of glowy-eyed, furish clawed beast, kind of scaly, furry. It's kind of, I like how they did it. They didn't really focus too much. Like they didn't want to put much into effects, and that's fine. So you just get an impression of something thick.
Also, too, sometimes I think the more they show, the less horrendous it can be.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes the less shown
The more
amplifies. Your mind fills in the blanks. Yeah.
Right.
And that sometimes is worse.
She wakes up the next morning, she's scraped. She had at one point while this is happening, she knows it's not a dream, and then she comes to in the morning and she's sure it's a dream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she doesn't say it, but you get the impression until she feels and sees the scrapes, and her husband's just like, oh, before you even say anything, I already filed my nails. It was a hangnail. I'm so sorry. And she's like, you had sex with me when I passed out? And he
just railroads over it.
Like it's nothing. And the worst part is people are like that today. Like, well, it was a wife, she was passed out. So what? They were planning on having sex anyway. Whoopee, no big deal. And that's how he kind of puts it over, and even makes a joke about it. It was kind of fun in a weird kind of necrophile sort of way.
Yeah, that was creepy and that's hello, red flags are waving. Yeah.
I had already decided I wanted to murder Guy, and that just solidified the murder of Guy.
I mean, it's awful. I'm not going to lie to you people. If you have any sensitivity, the whole movie is going to be hard to watch. That is one of the particular scenes that's hard to watch. There's a few others. That one's just wipes it away. She's like, well, we could have done it in the morning or tomorrow. That wasn't the only moment I could have got pregnant. He's like, oh, well, just nothing, and she even mentions that she dreamt she was being raped by some kind of, supernatural being or something like that. Or I forgot the exact word she used, but something that was not human. Inhuman, I think maybe she says.
I think she said
maybe.
Yeah. And he laughs it off like, well, thanks for the compliment kind of thing. Like, thinking I'm an inhuman beast thing. And I'm like, I mean, obviously, since this was part of his plan, he's not going to tell her, look, I gave you up to Satan. But, just, he could have even tried saying like, hey, you were having a terrible nightmare scratching, instead of, not that would make it better, but the fact that he was just like, pretty much raped you, don't care. It was kind of
that he just treated it as his little fun time. Yeah. I did somewhat. Yeah.
Not a biggie. It's fine. We wanted a baby anyway. So it's awful. Like, in case you're unaware, it was awful.
And it just keeps getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
The more you go on, the more it just piles on.
Yeah. So it builds up, and you think there might be a drop off, but no, it just keeps going.
No, it just
it never stops.
No, and it's just,
You know,
I was constantly just feeling adrenaline, through this whole film. And some of it might have been like the claustrophobic nature of the shooting, because I commented once, I think, there seems to be a lot of point of view use you're either seeing only what Rosemary sees, or the camera seems to be focusing in more on her, and it feels very claustrophobic the way the whole thing is shot.
or Becky also pointed out it was very voyeuristic as well. I remember
Yes.
you made this comment how it was like almost like over her shoulder or looking down at
Yeah,
her. Or,
yeah, and
it was somebody in the room peeping at her.
And it makes your skin crawl feeling that, because you're kind of feeling that too, and it does not give you a break from the tension, I think, with that aspect.
Yeah, and then from there on out, they isolate her further. So, she hasn't had a lot of contact outside of her husband and the Cassavetes,
Something like that, yeah.
Minnie and Roman, they're the satanic neighbors. And it's so insidious to the point where, when she has missed, the first couple of days of her period, she goes to a doctor that one of her female friends that you don't really see or hear from, up to this point, had gone to for her most recent kids. And it's Dr. Hill. Now, this is a funny thing. Like, I did not see this. I did not realize Dr. Hill was played by Charles Grodin at all. Charles Grodin, if you don't know, he was like the thief / Miss Piggy's love interest in The Muppet Caper. He was the dad in Beethoven. He was in almost like every movie from the 80s and 90s to some degree as some kind of supporting role, or even a cameo. So I Married an Axe Murderer. He's the guy that they try to commandeer his car to go get to the bed and breakfast to save Mike Myers' character. He's the driver of that car. And I love Charles Grodin. He died actually, I think, just last year, which is tragic. But I did not till I read that and I really looked, I would not have put that together. And I thought that was hilarious that was Charles Grodin, because it's not the kind of role you'd associate him with. I mean, he's not a bad guy in the role. He's just an OBGYN who's doing stuff. Yeah, right.
True.
Still, I mean, to be fair though, if you had gone to anybody with that story,
yeah, she's
lucky.
Mean,
he should have protected her more for sure. But
yes. And we may be jumping the gun on that portion of it. We haven't got to that yet. Suffice to say, he has some actions later on in the film which royally piss us off.
Yes, exactly. But at this point, he's just the OBGYN.
Yep.
He takes the blood, does a check, confirms that she's pregnant on the phone. And then, of course, as soon as she tells Guy, her husband, he goes over to Roman and Minnie. He's like, can I just tell Roman and Minnie? And she's like, well, yeah, of course, And so of course Roman and Minnie come over. And this is hilarious the whole time. When you think about the difference of how the healthcare and what they knew now versus then, they come over with a bottle of wine, they're smoking all around her, she's drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
And my mom, horrified thinking of it today, but this was 1960. Well, it was 68 when the movie came out and set in 66. So this is not even a thought in his mind that it could be wrong.
And my mom said over the course of, my brother and I, because there's 11 years difference between us, the advice she got kept changing with each one. It was, oh, don't do this. Okay, no, do this. Don't do this. Oh, no, it's fine. Or etc. So.
Yeah. So, and then from that moment on, basically Minnie and Roman take over completely what goes on with her life. Either they'll use the device of her husband to force it, or they'll just do it themselves. So right away, oh no, don't go to that Dr. Hill. We know it. Dr. Abe Saperstein. He's the socialite gynecologist to the stars kind of thing. And interestingly, Dr. Saperstein is played by Ralph Bellamy, who you might know as one of the Duke brothers from Trading Places. He also was in a lot of roles in the 80s and 90s. He also played in Pretty Woman. He was the dad the CEO of the company that Richard Gere's company was going to take over and dismantle, that he ends up merging with instead and helping to build. So you see Ralph Bellamy a lot, which I didn't catch that either, because to me, Ralph Bellamy was also in a lot of the Universal horror movies. He shows up in The Wolfman, just supporting roles a lot. So, but what he looked like when he was young and what he looked like when he was in Trading Places and all, and this middle part, you don't know it right away until you look. Plus he has a beard and mustache, and I don't think I've ever seen him with full facial hair aside from this role. But now that also Saperstein, Dr. Saperstein, truly insidious character, because
He
he's
makes me
almost worse
so
than all.
upset.
Because he plays the role of her friend almost, and when he says stuff, it almost sounds reasonable. Like he'll say something like when she starts seeing him, it's like, and don't read any books, which at first you're like,
Don't
what?
talk
And
to your friends.
He's like, because no pregnancy is just like in the books. It's never exactly like that. And if you read, so it sounds, he reasonables it out. And then like, don't talk to your friends, as you pointed out, Rebecca, because not one pregnancy is just like another one. And this is true. But when you think about what he's doing, like,
however,
not talking to your friends, not educating yourself should be red flags. And the way he rolled her into it with the reason why I'm telling you this was just fucking pure genius and horrible.
And it's a double betrayal too, because it's a betrayal of his medical oath, which is, I don't know. I don't want to say it's minor, but that is far less of a horrible thing, frankly, in this film than the rest of the shit he does. So.
Well, one has to think that he became the gynecologist to the stars in a certain way, and chances are,
true.
Yeah. Which also, who better to have on your payroll if you need baby seat and stuff than a gynecologist?
Yeah, especially if you're going to deliver Satan's baby himself, right?
Yep.
Which actually, we kind of. So the thing that we haven't really said is like, so we know that, of course, we mentioned to you that guy, Rosemary's husband, made this deal because he wanted to break through with his role. And before he actually put his wife up, like he made the agreement, but he didn't actually give her an advance. This doesn't make it better. What sets it up is he was up for this role in this play, this major role, and he didn't get it. And then the next thing you know, the person who did get it goes blind suddenly goes blind. And he gets the role. And then after that is when you get Rosemary gets raped and impregnated by Satan. So they deliver on their promises, which sounds awful, but this is also why you see Guy carrying it through. And this also explains why other people in the cult would probably still be going through with it, because they have tangible results from the deals that they're making.
Well, and I don't know if you guys noticed at the very beginning when they're going through the apartment of the old lady that they're going to be taking that apartment, she's written something or is writing something, and it says, I can no longer associate myself, and then goes off.
Oh yeah, I did catch that.
So she was obviously trying to pull herself out, and then suddenly just dies.
Yeah. And then also to be noted that later on it's revealed there's a passageway between Rosemary and Guy's apartment and Minnie and Roman's. And when they were first looking at the apartment, there's this huge secretary, this huge basically chest of drawers that have been pushed against closet, which ends up being the entryway. So this old woman who died and lost this apartment that they're getting was doing her best to protect herself and failed. So, this cult also had a woman they were grooming that they picked up off the streets, Minnie and Roman did, to actually be the initial mother of Satan's baby. And, I kind of understood that was happening, but I really didn't get the whole, like, why she had, like, because you hear chanting through the wall, but I never knew if they had gone through with it. And like, she realized and threw herself from the window afterwards, which seems weird because I never understood, but which is why I put captions on. So in the dream sequence where Rosemary hears Minnie's voice through the wall and you have the nun speaking instead, what she's actually saying to Roman, if you couldn't hear it well, which I couldn't without the captions, is that I can't believe you're the leader of anything. You should have never told her in advance. She's not open-minded enough. So they told this girl what they were hoping to do, probably, or Roman did, probably thinking she'd be like, oh, great, you took me off the streets. But yes, of course I want to be Satan's mother, And what happened instead is she threw herself in the window and killed herself to get away from these people.
The question is, did she refuse and was she pushed out the window?
Well, they weren't there.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
But somebody else could have pushed her out, though. To your point, it's not impossible that somebody else couldn't have come into the apartment and threw her out a window. But
I was going to say, the way that the book reflects on it is we're never told if she actually committed suicide or if they killed her, but the implication is that they had her killed. because she was not going to be compliant, and they needed someone who would be.
There you go. So,
can see
Betsy, did
that.
you read the book or were you just looking at excerpts? I'm curious.
Excerpts,
Excellent.
because I was curious about that too, because I'm like, it's highly implied that, like, with the way that she's talking to him, she's like, you should never have had her do this anyway, which makes it sound like they were kind of part of it, at least part of why she died. So, and I'm like, that makes sense. Okay, all right, that's just one of those things they left it ambiguous on purpose so that you could be like, because also when he walks up, when they come up upon the body,
He's not
says,
surprised.
has there been an accident?
Yeah. And then there's also like, oh, she was so depressed. All,
Right.
This happens, periodically, rather standardly.
And Rosemary's like, nah, she was in a pretty good mood before.
No, she sure weren't. Yeah.
Well, and there is a track record we know of the cult,
causing things to happen, regardless if
thank you.
not.
I could not get a good phrase out on that one.
Yeah,
because they have the actor who goes blind, Hutch in a coma.
Goes into a coma. The old lady who lived in the apartment coma died as well.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't think it's a huge extrapolation to say that these are the ones who are causing it, and then likewise probably the woman.
Also, when she gets the book that was from Hutch, All Them Witches. All of Them Witches is my favorite name. I'm like, I would have started a podcast called All of Them Witches.
All Them Witches.
All of Them
I would
Witches.
say,
I was thinking
it would make a great. I was thinking it would make a great metal band name.
Oh yeah,
that's another excellent use of it.
All of Them Witches. We did notice there is a band named after when she's doing the taking All of Them Witches and rearranging them, trying to figure out the name that Hutch was trying to come up with, and it comes after the fall is a metal band that was named after this.
Nice.
I'm not surprised.
I'm pretty sure that one is a band, like for real, and it was. So, but what was I saying? Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, I think we've lost it.
Well, you know what? Maybe it's the point you were mentioning the wealth issue.
Well, All of Them Witches. In All of Them Witches, it literally says that witches can cause blindness, coma, something else,
paralyzation, I think,
and death. And I was like, oh, so they're just going to tell us right out, right? They can do this. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, they're really telling Rosemary right out. I mean, because that was a pivotal point. So Rosemary has the feeling of something going wrong, sort of. So she's in pain, basically from the whole start of her pregnancy until like maybe 2 months before she's due, 3 months before she's due. And here's where it gets even more insidious. So like she tells the doctor's like, oh, it'll go in a couple days. And anytime she brings it up, it'll go in a couple days. And the makes excuses because she's just has stiff joints, and it's just the pressure of, the baby growing that's making her feel pain. And it's normal, couple days. She's emaciated. Oh, it's normal to lose a few pounds, at the beginning, and then you'll put on the weight. And her friend Hutch, who they had apparently, I'm guessing they were leasing, my conjecture is they were leasing a place from him or renting a place from him.
That was my feeling from it as well, that they were.
Because that's who they go to get out. It seemed like they went to him to get out of their lease to get into the satanic apartments. And he jokingly says, I almost wanted to give a bad reference to make you stay with me. And Hutch just seems like a really sweet guy, sort of a father figure for Rosemary. And he comes over to see her, shocked by her appearance because she's so thin. She talks about the pain, and Rosemary's like, oh, it's normal. She also says it's normal about being so thin at the beginning, she'll gain weight later. And it's interesting because like anytime she has a visitor, anytime something like that happens, like within moments, there's a knock on the door, and this time it was Roman coming over, and you could see him just trying to push his way into the apartment. So of course, Rosemary is compelled to say, do you want to meet my friend? Because first he's like, oh, is Guy home? And she's like, no, it's my friend Hutch. And so he comes in and they talk again, and you can tell now that Rosemary's parroting words from the doctor and from Roman, because when Hutch mentions again how frail and thin she looks, Roman's like, oh, well, that's normal at the beginning for them to lose weight. And then she, like literally the same phrase. she mentions a charm that actually had been the woman who fell out the windows that they gave to her, about how it was good luck charm, and it has tannis root in it. Tannis root is not a real thing, just in case you were wondering. But
I thought about it and I was like, it would be really smart of Ira Levine to make up something instead of having a whole bunch of people go out and find some kind of weird herb and put it around their neck and stuff. So it made sense to me. But
and I think he wasn't trying to make a real cult. I think he was just trying to make something fictitious that people can draw their own conclusions and parallels to. So yeah. And I liked how he avoided making it like actual stuff that you would hear like in a wise woman's apothecary, you know what I mean? But and this is what kind of clues Hutch in to begin with, because he's like tannis root, and and all of this makes him do research. And Hutch calls like, well, while they're visiting, Roman leaves, and then within minutes, Guy comes running in the door, which is weird. He should have been at rehearsal. So there's that whole thing. And there's also a couple interesting instances of product placement in the movie, which I had thought was a newer thing, but apparently was very prevalent in the 60s as well. So you have the Yamaha commercials, and Yamaha gave, I think, Lansky and I forgot the name of the actor that plays Guy, Cassavetes or something like that. It's very similar to the Cassavetes.
Yeah.
It's Cassavetes.
Very good. Yamahas to ride around in during the filming. I think they got to keep them. Pall Mall is like, so Guy runs in, brings in a carton of Pall Mall, dumps them out in front of the kitchen table. It's probably the most obvious product placement you've ever seen in your life. It was like, look at this carton of Pall Mall cigarettes. Yay.
I got a carton of cigarettes. Woohoo!
Open.
Yeah. And Hutch leaves shortly thereafter, which then leads to our next product placement, because he calls her and basically doesn't tell her what he found out, but says, meet me later. And I love this because Rebecca pointed this out. Always say it now. If you say meet me later, you're never going to
die. You're going to die. It's guaranteed.
You just signed your own death warrant. But the interesting thing is, when Hutch had went to leave to begin with, he suddenly can't find a glove. And now he's supposed to meet, he calls and he's supposed to meet Rosemary later. He says, meet me at the Time Life building, another product placement.
Which they bring back later, because later she's sitting in the doctor's office and reads it's a Time magazine. Yeah.
Of course, Hutch never makes it. She calls to find out, if he forgot the appointment, gets a nice friend on the phone and says, I'm so sorry, darling. Hutch fell into a coma. Oddly similar.
I think
to
we've
how
heard that one before. Yeah.
Coma, sudden coma. And of course, as Rosemary's walking back, guess who shows up? Kitty. And of course, Rosemary's in horrifying pain. So she goes home. Hutch eventually dies. She gets the book after the fact at the funeral, which is All of Them Witches, which starts making her put things together, because it's in there. Here's this, here's that. And she finds out that the acronym Roman, or the name Roman Cassavetes, thank you, is the actual name of the son of the witch, Stephen Marcato.
Yes.
And she starts tying it together. But what she doesn't tie together initially is that her husband's involved. So of course, the first person she tries to tell what's happening is her husband. Because she doesn't think she was raped by Satan at this point. She thinks it was still her husband, and she thinks that the cult is trying to steal her baby.
Right.
She hasn't made
a baby to do horrible witchy things with.
Yeah. So she tells her husband patronizes the shit out of her and puts the book away.
Did you notice that if he puts it on top of two novels of human sexuality, female, human sexuality, male?
Mm-hmm.
They're books by Kinsey.
Sorry, go ahead.
They're the books by Kinsey.
Yes,
the
Kinsey
okay.
reports.
I didn't realize they were Kinsey stuff.
Yes.
Kinsey report, yeah. But he also, you can see, he even goes on his tiptoes to make sure that it's like well out of her reach. Like his arm length is out of her reach to begin with, but he even goes further to make sure she's not going to get it without climbing on furniture, because he's probably thinking a pregnant woman won't do that anyway. Of course, she does try to find it.
Yeah.
It turns out he threw it away.
And it has struck me so much as another one of those I am the adult, you're the child moments. Because what do you do when there's a toddler that has something that you don't want him to get? You put it up high.
Mm-hmm.
So.
You poor hysterical woman who can't take care of herself, let me guide you because you are inept and childlike.
Yes, exactly. You can't manage yourself, so I'll manage you. And it's just
Also, you're pregnant.
another one. It's another one of those choking moments of the movie.
Yeah. You're soft and pregnant, and you shouldn't worry your head about things.
Now, additionally, I kind of glossed over this. So I think it was before Hutch died, but after he went into the coma,
Mhm.
Rosemary's like, I'm done with Roman and Minnie being all over this. I'm done with it. I'm having a party. It's going to be, and she literally says it's going to be people under 60, which I also found interesting. Never thought about this because, like, between the actor and actress, so between Mia Farrow and Cassavetes, who plays Guy, right?
Mhm.
They do not seem to be on par age-wise. Like, he looks like 40, she looks like 20 to me, you know?
Agreed.
And I don't know if that was done on purpose, but you know, in the scene when she says no one under 6 or no one over 60 is allowed, he's like, well, I'm glad to see that I made the cut, you know, which made me wonder if it was deliberate that he was that he's older than her, you know, the look wise.
I watched a few interviews and documentary shorts about the movie, and they were discussing the casting, but I don't know if they touched upon that. I do know originally they were considering Robert Redford for that role too.
Jack Nicholson was in the running as well,
Okay.
but Jack Nicholson, they said, looked too creepy.
Roman Polanski said he was too creepy for the role. You would know right away he was bad.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, you're correct. He would have hit the stage and I'm like, bad guy.
So to be fair, I kind of thought that the guy who did play Guy looked bad too to begin with.
Honestly, I came into this just, if you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, which I had, but if you hadn't seen Rosemary's Baby, which apparently this was the first time my husband had ever watched it, is when we watched it this time, you're still going to know he's the bad guy. He comes across creepy.
Yeah. I mean, just because he's constantly
He's narcissistic as fuck.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, which is a horrible aspect in and of itself.
I was going to say, if you didn't know that the whole cult stuff was bad, you know that she's dating a narcissist who is gaslighting her the whole time. Like, even if none of the other mystical stuff is happening, he's still gaslighting her.
That alone is the abuse.
Yeah. And then it's, of course, worse because it's far worse. He sold her out to this cult.
Yeah.
But minimal, he's just a crappy husband.
But so she has found her ovaries and is like sticking her guns about this party. Minnie comes over, she waylays Minnie's like, nope, don't need your help. You got all this taken care of. Don't worry about it. You relax and we're gonna have this party. The party happens, everybody's commenting, you know, they don't mean to, but they're like, oh my God, because she looks so shockingly emaciated, thin, and sickly for a pregnant woman for sure, that everybody's commenting, everybody's worried. And there's a point where she's in front of one friend, and there's a point in the kitchen where the friend that had recommended Dr. Hill to begin with, she tells her that she's not with Dr. Hill anymore. And it's interesting because you see her husband run into the kitchen at that same time, you know, like to interrupt the conversation, and pulls
how her
that friend
friends
away.
literally forced him out.
No, not there yet. Not there
okay.
yet. So this is when she's putting the flowers in a vase and she's just having a casual conversation with a friend
on,
about not going with Dr. Hill anymore. And Guy comes in at that moment, interrupts the conversation to bring the dip out, and then gets that friend to help so that she's out of the kitchen, not talking to Rosemary. And then you're right, later on, while she's putting the vase down, she has a shooting pain happen to her in front of another friend. And that friend's like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? Her and two other women pull her into the kitchen and forcibly push Guy out. Like, like your friends
it reminded me of, you know, no one is more supportive than drunk female strangers in the bathroom at the goth club.
Yeah, except for these were her friends. And
yes.
But it's a good analogy.
It reminded me of that.
Very good. Similar. Interesting parallel. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, they block her out and they're like, get a second opinion. This is what's interesting to me. Rosemary's first response is, well, one, she says, I know something's, or one of her friends says, that kind of pain means something is wrong and you should get a second opinion. And Rosemary immediately comes back with, no, I'm not getting an abortion, which is interesting to me. Because it says that she knew something was so wrong that she thought abortion might be something she might have to do. And her first response is, I'm not going to do it. Like, that's how much pain this woman was in, that and how worried and scared she knows something's wrong. She thinks the baby's dead, basically, is what comes out later. Like,
I was gonna say she does, because then later she says something to the effect of that. So yeah, she thinks that the baby's dead or dying inside her.
Yeah, and this makes it very interesting to me on several levels because one, she had been so programmed to be like, no, I can't have an abortion, but she thinks this is a dead fetus inside her and it's still like, nah, it's okay. I'm just going to go through with the birthing a dead fetus anyway. I mean, it's very disturbing on that level. And the fact that she thought that that's what they were going for when her friends were like, no one's telling you to do that.
We just
second opinion, jackass.
Talk to another doctor. Yeah, I mean, she's internalized too, I think, so much that she knows there is something wrong. She knows there's something not right about this pregnancy.
And like, I'm looking this up. So if you guys want to talk, I'm trying to see, like,
sure.
I know Roe versus Wade didn't happen until the 70s, but I'm not sure
I think.
If abortion was legal specifically in New York in 1966. So I'm looking that up.
I don't know, but I mean, there were always ways to find sympathetic doctors and such, or the horrible back alley abortions.
Yeah. So no, according to Google, it was not legal even in New York until 1970. So this is not even a legal option for her, and that's still her first response.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Well, I think that there was at that time, there was more doctor-patient confidentiality. So as long as you could afford a doctor and could go to a doctor, you probably could get the medical treatment that you needed.
Well, there was an Underground Railroad. You can call Jane throughout the United States to have one, but it was not legal. And like, you would run a huge risk if you went to your doctor and said, I need an abortion. Your doctor would be running a huge risk if he said you need to get an abortion. But this would have been a medical procedure
for her. If the baby was dead, it would have been a medical
if it were dead. But, like, just aside from like the fact that her brain went there is like, it was not a common or viable option. They had back alley abortions for sure, not legal. I mean, reference Dirty Dancing for that. Women did fly outside. If you had wealth, you can fly to Europe. That's what a lot of people that had thalidomide issues did at that time period. They flew to Europe to have the flipper babies, aborted. I'm sorry, that sounds really, really, really facile, and I didn't mean to sound that way. They were severely deformed and not viable often, and due to taking thalidomide, which was being marketed in the States as a prenatal vitamin.
Yeah.
Specifically as a prenatal vitamin. And again, at that time, not legal to have an abortion in the United States. So if you had money, you can fly to Europe and have it done by an actual doctor. If you didn't have money, again, you're looking at your back alley abortions using the Jane Network to have at least better care than, a guy with a folding table and a rusty scalpel. Yeah. So it's just interesting. Like, it was so ingrained in her Catholic upbringing that was her first thought, not doing it.
Yeah,
it
seems a very sudden jump too.
Right.
From I'm having pain. No, I'm not doing this. What? How did that escalated quickly?
Yeah.
It's obvious it's been on her mind that may be the path that has to be taken.
I think it's certainly a sign that it was.
Yeah, it's just very, and the fact that you realize for sure then that despite all her assuring her friends that it's normal to lose this much weight and the pain, that she knows something's wrong.
She knows,
despite all the gaslighting, she knows something's wrong. She also had stopped taking, so the doctor prescribed, instead of vitamin pills for her, prescribed that Minnie make her an herbal protein drink for her pregnancy, fresh every morning. And about 3 days prior to having the party, I think it was, she'd stopped taking it. She, sent Minnie out of the room, would dump it and bring her the extra, the empty glass later instead of taking it. So she also very aware, even before she could Hutch's book, because this is all before Hutch's book comes into her possession, something is wrong. And then she's having it out with her husband because her husband's pissed, which, by the way, she has some shitty friends. Did you see that house? I mean, cigarettes on the floor, food everywhere. These people, like, this is your pregnant friend, and none of these ladies stay behind to help clean up. Bullshit.
Yeah.
That party was a little wild too. Like, I was like, what is happening at this party? I mean, I know they're your friends, lady, but all right. It's a little wild for what I would consider like a pregnant woman celebrating her pregnancy, which is what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. But yeah, I just totally
destroyed the house.
Yeah, and total bullshit. There'd at least been 3 female friends there helping her clean up. Period.
They'd have been like, no, you go sit down, we'll do this.
Yes.
Wait.
Yeah. So as far as unreality in the film, that's my call on that one. That's an unrealistic
Yeah.
scene right there. But
I agree.
like Satan raping her was more realistic to me than friends leaving a mess like that with their pregnant friend. That's more likely to happen than that. Okay. But
Truly.
but there's the husband kind of like making remarks about she had this party, look at this mess, they should just move out. And he's being mean, but not like it's that fake humor, but you're actually being mean. And
it's just a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But interesting. And but she's like, I'm going to go to Dr. Hill in the morning. I'm getting a second opinion. And he's adamant she doesn't do it.
He flips his shit.
Yeah. I'm not paying 2 bills. We're not paying 2 doctors. We got the best doctor there is. This Hill guy is a nobody. You're not doing this. And she's fighting back. And, this basically comes out that she's, so worried about this baby. And then all of a sudden, the pain that was only supposed to last a couple of days and has been going on for 6 months finally stops. And she feels the baby move. And now she's fine. Because in her brain, that was her worry. She thought the baby was dead. Yeah. She isn't fine. She thinks she's fine.
Yeah. And I always felt too like, oh, how convenient that it stopped just at that moment and whatnot. It seems so contrived.
In my head, I just think like the baby of Satan was like, oh, I'm hurting her, and now she's gonna go get a second opinion, and that might be, oh, I gotta stop. Done.
Yeah, that's kind of how it feels as well. To me,
Satan's baby is like, oh, mommy and daddy are fighting, and it's over me. I gotta stop. Bonk.
Yeah. It was an interesting timing for sure, because of course at that point then all is question of going, because Dr. Saperstein had been saying all along that the pain would just stop, and now it did. So now she's not worried she can feel the baby move. She's not concerned that
everything's fine.
But a very telling scene that she doesn't pick up on those is she's so excited the baby's moving. She grabs her husband's hand, she sticks it against her stomach and is like, look, you can feel it move. He pulls his hand away in pure fucking disgust. Pure disgust. And there's no other way to describe. Good kudos to the actor, because you read pure disgust right there. He's like, no. Like he just stuck his hand in something foul. Disgust. You just stepped barefoot in cat vomit. Disgust.
There's an earlier moment where she says, you haven't looked at me since that night. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just busy. And you're like, no, he regrets it. I mean,
well, he knows he did wrong. He can't face her.
He knows he did something wrong. He can't face her. He knows what he did.
Oh,
it's the evidence. It's the evidence of his crimes smack in front of him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And he comes in his slick white suits, because his suits get nicer and nicer as the whole thing. He looks nicer and nicer, and he's like more wealthy looking. And she's getting more and more gaunt and emaciated as the days pass until this moment. And then she starts to look healthy again, or at least healthier again.
She starts gaining weight.
Less
color back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And God knows she shouldn't have been gaunt. She was eating raw meat.
Yeah. Which raises an interesting point. So apparently at this point in time, Mia Farrow was a vegetarian, and she still actually ate raw liver for that scene. Which
that scene, I could not watch it. I had to look away because my gross factor kicked in, and I was like, let's not hurl while we're watching this.
Made me think of the series B, but that's a whole other story.
I was just like, all right, raw meat it is, girl. Do what you gotta.
Yeah. But, we kind of skipped over a major point, which seems so nothing, but it's kind of highlights the whole issue. So when she's found out she's pregnant, I think it was like maybe the next week or something. You guys can correct me on the timeline, of course. She goes out and she has her haircut. I believe that was called a pixie cut, right? That short.
Yeah.
At Vidal Sassoon, which it actually was. Note of trivia. Vidal Sassoon, they cut her hair for this in the movie. In reality, the actress's hair for that part in the movie. So she has a short little cut. And although I won't say it's the most flattering thing in the world, I think she looks cute.
Yeah, this looks fine.
But her husband
has pixie enough features that she can totally do the pixie cut. Yeah. It totally
she has pixie features.
Personal favorite. I think they should have lengthened that, like the front part a little bit. It seemed to be cut off too bit, but yeah.
But her husband sees her and he just like
he freaks the fuck out. Yeah.
He's a total dick. Like, here's his pregnant wife that he recently had raped by Satan, and he can't even swallow back his ire at the haircut. No, he totally just lets in, like, he doesn't scream at her, but he's just, every chance he has, he comments about how what a horrible decision that hair was. And it kind of adds to it. Like, she can't even pick her haircut right on her own, you know? It's just more of the same.
Yeah, it's more of that constant belittling and harassment, you know, to reduce her to really just submissive
No
little nothing.
confidence in herself, nothing,
Yeah.
you know.
It's designed to tear her down.
It was an independent decision she made without talking to him, and she was going to pay the price.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Even just on a base level, narcissists don't like it when you do that. If you add in the supernatural aspect of it, yeah.
But you know, so she had that moment with her friends, and then her friends are gone again. Like, I don't know if they called her and she's not talking to them, if they're not calling her, if Guy called, like, that to me, that's interesting, because, you know, you have a friend and you see that they're in pain and you know that they should be going to the doctor and you hear nothing about it. Like, I'm guessing that maybe she spoke to them in those, like, much like I can't believe that her friends would have left her with that huge a mess when she was pregnant, or even if she wasn't really, I don't believe that her friends weren't following up with her after that. So I feel like they had to have called her, and I'm guessing she had to have blown them off. Like, not blown them off, but been like, oh, no, the pain's gone, everything's fine, the baby's moving, I was just being excitable, you know?
Right.
The
And
second
isolating
guessing her own
herself from her
reactions.
friends.
Yeah.
Which you do that. So, like, when you are gaslit enough and you
Mhm.
are controlled enough and you're shaken to the core enough, so, like, where she thought was something wrong, she had backing from her friends, but then the pain stopped, so she was wrong, because that pain stops. To her, she was wrong and everything was fine. So, but the fact that her friends were going to back up her wrongness is now her pushing herself away from her friends, thinking they were leading her down the wrong path, is my interpretation of the situation. Not necessarily what happened, just my interpretation of the situation.
I think it's not a stretch to imagine that there was self-isolation going on. So.
And then Hutch dies. She gets a call. She goes to the funeral. She gets all of them witches book. Figures out who Roman is, figures out the whole thing, doesn't figure out her husband's involved. He hides the book. Now I can't remember what made her finally figure out that it was her husband that was part of it. Like, I don't know what triggered her that, because, like, originally maybe it was after he threw away the book, or maybe it was when she went and got the second book, because she went to the library to try to get a different copy, and she got more books and started reading more.
I think it was the moment that she called Baumgartner.
Well, no. I know that she got it then, but what made her call Baumgartner? So there was a step in between there where she realized that her husband might be in on it, that made her go try to verify it by calling the other actor that went blind. I can't remember what.
I think that book was the one that said that they can cause blindness, that witches can cause
the library. Okay. But yes, you're absolutely right. So she gets clued in finally, probably from the second book, that she finds that her husband may be in on this. Calls the actor that suddenly went blind, that allowed her husband to have the starring role, which interesting. So you see, she looks very confused and, like, stunted on the phone.
Right.
She did not know whose voice it was on the phone. The actress, Mia Farrow, didn't know who it was on the phone, who was doing it, but she could tell it was familiar. It was Tony Curtis on the other end of the phone.
Oh my gosh,
So
I didn't know that.
It totally played into the role completely, but that actual confusion is, you know, like, was because of that, because she was like,
yes. Polanski wanted her to have that kind of a registering, like, confused face. So that's what he did it on purpose, knowing it would be someone she would know the voice of, but wouldn't necessarily pick up right away.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
he's still an evil motherfucker.
Yes, he's still an evil motherfucker. Doesn't mean that he didn't have good ideas.
Yes. Just means he should have his dick cut off and shoved down his throat. However,
and you should
appreciate the art, right?
Yeah,
so,
it's always the question of, can you appreciate the art knowing who made it? And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't.
And sometimes you realize that why it was so good, because he was a terrible fucking monster. So there you go.
Actually, yes.
There you go. So anyway, she confirms the fact that her husband did acquire a piece of this actor's clothing, and soon thereafter, this actor went blind. So now she knows her husband's involved in this. which is leads to the phone booth scene where she tries. So this is also interesting to me. She doesn't call her family. She doesn't call her friends. She runs and tries to call Dr. Hill, who does agree to see her. And this is where it becomes, so it's hard to criticize a little bit, like almost all these things, what happens is, and I get it, because what happens is you've been put so far that you sound frantic and hysterical because you are frantic and somewhat hysterical because all this has happened. You come to a realization you're desperate for help, but it's hard because you also know that the more frantic and hysterical you sound, the more they're not going to take you seriously.
The less
and
they'll believe you.
Yeah. I mean,
It's
you see this with
catch
Gaslight,
22.
Invisible Man 2020,
Mhm.
you know, and it's awful because your brain goes, well, of course they're not going to believe you. You sound fucking insane. But how are you calm now?
Yeah. Well, and you think like she could have just been like, look, my husband has been very abusive to me and I'm trying to get away. And they might have been like, oh God, and tried to help her. But because she goes in with this, my husband's in league with witches,
The devil.
with
Yeah.
my old doctor, and I was, all of this is happening. But of course, in the moment, you're just like, I just want to tell somebody the truth. I need them to understand what's happening to me.
I need to not be insane by getting someone to understand the veracity of this.
Exactly.
Even though it's fucking insane. Now, and to be fair to Dr. Hill, he was following along with her. Like, I think he was thinking that it was reality mixed with some pregnancy hysteria, because he was going, okay, now the witch thing aside, there are cases where people steal babies. And this might be the situation, and there is like, baby adoption ring or something to give to wealthy people. He was kind of with her, despite like he didn't buy into the witch until she said her doctor, Dr. Saperstein, was in it. And again, we have to go back to the fact that this guy was a well-known, lauded physician, like writing papers, honors, to the stars. And when she threw his name into it, that was it for Dr. Hill. Now he is sure she's just hysterically nuts and might need committed. And what makes him even more horrible is, instead of trying to handle it in a reasonable way, where, maybe he lets her go to the hospital and takes over just to assure her and keep her safe. Because, it's not unreasonable to say that hormones can make you go wacky. So that he might have protected her that way. What he does instead is completely betrays her. Completely. Just rest. We'll get a room arranged for you at the hospital. Just, sit in the air conditioning. It'll be okay. And the next thing you know, there's Dr. Saperstein and her husband taking her away. And Saperstein being like, if you say one more word, they're going to put you in the nut house. Which is probably not untrue, because Hill probably would have recommended she go into a nut house, but still she's trapped now. She's trapped.
And I mean, you hate to think about it, but...
and everything about that scene highlighted that trap, the way she's being dragged out.
Clutched by the arm.
Mm-hmm.
Treated like a 3-year-old.
Well into the 60s, it was still fairly common for men to have their wives committed because they were hysterical. And you didn't have to have any proof other than she doesn't like to do laundry anymore.
She just seems depressed and not herself. Yeah, and all you had to have one doctor confirm it, I think, is all you needed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was Dr. Hill with her crazy story about witches and Dr. Saperstein being part of the cult. And
yeah, so it sucks and it's awful, but of course they would have called her husband. Of course they would have. Yeah. They wouldn't call her parents. They wouldn't call like her next of kin. They would call her husband because she belongs to him now.
Yep, your husband owns you.
Yep.
Period. End of story. If your parents don't own you and you get married, then your husband owns you. And man, kudos to poor Rosemary. She's in shock. She's terrified. She's trapped. She still has a presence of mind to try to make a run for it. Now at this time, be aware that she has not put it together about the trap door or the adjoining door that's hidden in the closet. So she, makes a ploy, drops her purse, jumps into the elevator, and gets herself into her house, locks the door, and tries to call her friend, who finally tries to call a friend who is unfortunately not home at that moment. And in the interim, of course, the cultists let themselves into her apartment through the hidden door in the closet. And she also happens to be going to labor at this point. So she was like only 2 or 3 days away anyhow. So this part is given the extra running, jumping, and trauma, and the fact that,
not out of the realm of possibility,
yeah,
for sure.
very realistic. And plus, it's kind of an estimate when you're going to have your kid. They don't actually,
Yeah.
they can't predict it down to the minute unless they're doing a C-section.
Nope.
So she goes into labor. Her friend does call back. Guy answers the phone. It's like, no, she's not here. Boom, boom. Though I kind of think a friend would have been coming knocking on the door within minutes, actually, with that.
Yes. Yeah.
But
You think,
who knows?
I was gonna say, who knows? Maybe she did, and she got turned away by the neighbors. Like, oh, they went to the hospital for her to have the baby. I don't know which hospital they went to. Sorry.
Or if she could even get in the building.
Yeah.
Right.
And plus, in the interim, you don't know. Like, you don't know if Guy convinced them off or if Rosemary had mostly put them off. Plus, she had left a message with the babysitter. The babysitter might have been like, no, she sounded fine. It's okay. Yeah. Maybe she was just going into labor. Yeah. She gives birth. Now, this is what's really weird and twisted. Well, not compared to everything else, it's not really that weird, but she gives birth. Her husband tells her that she had a kid and that it was a son. And then she passes out again. She goes, and then she comes to again, and then they tell her it died. And that fucking doctor tells her, basically, it's your fault. We lost the baby. It's your fault. If you'd listened to me, we would have had it in the hospital and you'd been able to save it, but you didn't. And at this point, even Guy's like, oh, let's just push the doctor out the room.
Yeah. Right. Like,
but of course, the baby's not dead. We know this. The cult has taken baby Satan and has no intention of having it around her or her knowing that that's what happened at this point in time. But they keep her drugged and in bed. And so the first time I watched this, I had to be 7, 8, 9 years old. And I've seen it a couple times since then, but I usually don't watch it because it's very painful and very disgusting to watch and triggering. But I had never initially caught the whole breast pump funnel glass thing.
Mm-hmm.
With the bulb on it, because looks nothing like what we have nowadays, for sure. And then this one really was very archaic looking. I didn't even realize they had them in the 60s, which is extremely naive of me, but why would I know that? I actually wasn't even born till 75.
I didn't catch that either, frankly, until later viewings of the movie.
Yeah. And so basically they were having her pump out her own breast milk for reasons unbeknownst to anybody. Like, I guess they gave her some excuse as to why she would have to do that, which you wouldn't have to do that after a pregnancy when you don't have a kid. It would just dry up and go away. There's no need to.
You would have let down for a couple weeks, but it would eventually dry up.
Yeah.
So
there were in fact, pumping it would keep it flowing, which is what they wanted. But yeah, and which is probably why they didn't want her reading books.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the baby crying. And even like tries to justify at one point, like she asks her husband if maybe it's the new people that moved in, if they have a baby. He's like, yeah, how'd you know? To cover up for the fact that it's in fact her baby next door, Roman minis. She's still suspicious of her husband. She asks to try to see his shoulders to see if there's a witch mark on him. There isn't. She stops taking the drugs. Laura Louise, who is just makes me want to vomit. She's a terrible person. Like, not any of them are good, but she's just
all terrible,
childish and pettish and just comes in to take her tray away because she's been bedridden for, I don't know, weeks now. Because it looks like there's at least 7 days worth of pills that she has stuck into the crack of that her bed frame. So it's at least been a week, if not longer, because she was being drugged before then. But she figures out something's going on. So when Laura Louise goes to take away the tray that includes a cup of which is very little breast milk, by the way, they had to be supplementing with formula because that wouldn't even be enough to feed a baby for like a gulp. She grabs a spoon and dunks it into the breast milk, the dirty spoon. And Laura Louise's like, we don't do that. And she's like, but why if we're just throwing it away? Because she just asked what they were doing with the milk. They're like, oh, we're just throwing it away just for your own health or something. I don't know. And she's like, well, if you're just throwing it away, what does it matter if I stick a dirty spoon in it? And Laura Louise is like, it's just messy.
Oh shit, I'm caught. I can't say anything.
Oops. But at this point, she figures out the closet. She tests her theory. Guy comes in briefly. You think she's going to get caught because, I don't know, to get ice for the party that's happening next door about her baby. She's carrying a knife. She sneaks in. The goth in me loves the black bassinet. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
This lovely draped black bassinet with an upside down cross mobile. Every goth mama's dream. I'm not a mama, but if I were, that's what you'd say.
I would never have a baby, but if I had a baby, they would have that bassinet.
Yes. And this I love. Now it's funny because like my Mandela effect is I have a memory of her seeing the baby and the baby having those reptilian kind of haunty eyes on it, but that never happens in this movie.
And they even specify in some of the interviews and documentary stuff that I've watched that he's like, yeah, we made the decision not to show the infant. And Polanski himself, he's like, yeah, we never showed it.
Yeah. So like one of two things happen. I either, like I said, Mandela effect, or I'm remembering inserting a different scene from another movie, or I've combined scenes. Because what you do see after a while is she flashes back to where she's raped by the, inhuman beast. And you do have those reptilian eyes flash in her mind from that, because they show that during when she's being raped. And I think I maybe in my mind later had overlaid that eye over the babies, or like I said, it was a completely different movie where they had a demonic baby face thing going on.
Oh yeah.
But either way, you don't ever see the baby. She just like, his eyes, what have you done to his eyes? And then they comment later about his hands and feet.
Minor caveat on that dialogue. She never refers to it as him. It's it.
Mm-hmm.
What have you done to its eyes?
Well,
and so
maybe
I'd have to go back and double check.
She might say him when she's talking about rocking the bassinet, where she tells Laura Louise.
Oh, she does there, but
or she might say it there too. I don't remember.
But her first gut reaction did seem to be it, and that to me says deep down she knows something. I mean, she knows something is fucked up. She knows it's not.
Yeah,
what you would expect.
Completely agree. Also, what I thought was really interesting and traumatizing and sad and horrible. So there are parts where they act kind of stupid. There's like praise Satan year one. And by the way, he was born in June of 1966, 666. You take out the actual day, they make a point of that. You have crazy Laura Louise is like, Laura Louise, by the way, wants her dead, wants Rosemary dead. Just kill her. We don't need her breast milk. And is just like fucking nuts. And Minnie sticks up for Rosemary, as does Roman. Like, this is the baby's mother. Shut the fuck up, Laura Louise.
I almost feel like
there's a rivalry.
Like, like there's a switch once she discovers, the coven into that, and the baby and whatnot, that it almost becomes like dark comedy, black comedy in a way. Well, because they're so absurd in their reactions.
And to be fair, there's a lot of elements of that in there throughout the movie, to be sure, but there's a lot of it at once in that scene. You have the stereotype of the Japanese character with the camera, loopy ass Laura Louise, the knife flipping comment where Roman starts speaking to her and she's like, shut up, you're not even here, you're in whatever country he said he was going to, because there's a point where Saperstein, acting like her ally, says that Roman's going to go away. Roman and Minnie are going away for a while, so you're safe. Yeah. And so she brings that up to him. So there's a lot going on with that. You're right. I mean, in that scene, particularly, a lot of just dark comedy elements for sure.
The absurdity of it all comes out.
Yes. But what's really compelling and horrible is then they become very reasonable, very kind to her, with the exception of Laura Louise. They shut Laura Louise down. Minnie gets her a cup, and another product placement opportunity. It's plain Lipton tea. It'll calm you down. They're very, and the whole time they've been very like maternal and paternal to her to begin with, like both to Guy and Rosemary, but it comes even more to now. And they just start reasonably talking to her like, it's your baby, you're its mother. You're still, join us, be its mother, be a mother to your child.
It's awful. It's awful. It's horrible. And that's the insidious evil nature of it, is that they're making it sound reasonable.
But they still point out the guy's a prick. Because he comes over, and this is disgusting. So he comes over, he's like, it's not really so bad. How would this be? You thought you lost the baby. This is like it died. Isn't this better? It's alive at least. You didn't lose it, and she's like, she spits in his face and is like, get the fuck away from me.
It's like,
and
hello, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Like, I was gonna say, if I were going to join the cult to take care of my baby, or not even join, they tell her she doesn't even have to join up or do anything with them, just be a mother to her child. Like, I don't know, I might have been pulled a Salome and like, bring me his head, like, all right, if you want me to do this and be its mother, his ass is dead.
And I'm sure they would have been like, oh, okay.
And by the way, Laura Louise goes with it.
Yeah,
but
it's just
the movie just ends with her. It doesn't make a decision. Like Roman lures her over to the bassinet because she's telling Laura Louise, you need to stop, because Laura Louise is rocking this bassinet like a mad woman. She's like, you know, and
Like she's air
Roman
hockey with the
shoos
kid.
her away and is gently walking the bassinet. And, you know, she's already been walking over towards it. She sticks her hand on the bassinet. You just be a mother to your child. And, you know, you don't really see her take over the rocking per se, but the implication is they might have lured her in,
Yeah.
you know, but it just ends there. Basically.
Yeah.
That's it. You don't know what happens.
Interesting point of trivia. One of the extras in that scene later started a cult out in California. His name was Michael something. The Buddha Field, I think, was the cult. And there's just, literally he has like maybe a 2-second glimpse of the camera on his face.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I read that in the true too. I don't remember his name either. Sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah. Whew. There's a lot going on. Like also some other interesting trivia. William Castle really thought this film was cursed. He thought Satan was stalking him afterwards. And was truly terrified for it. I don't remember all the details, but it really bothered him.
Yeah, he apparently, well, one, of course, the
because the Sharon Tate's death was one of the reasons. Sorry.
Yeah, so Sharon Tate's death, and then he got a series of like bizarre ailments. Like he got a really, really bad kidney disease, like infection. And then a couple other things happened to him, and it just all kept compounding. And so he really thought that he was haunted or cursed.
Urinary tract infection. There we go. Yeah, and other various maladies.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just found it.
Yeah, so he just felt like, yeah, I'm cursed. But of course, the same thing happened with the people who did The Exorcist and the people who did The Omen. They also thought that their movie was cursed. So pretty much if you put the devil in it, you're going to think it's cursed.
Yeah, apparently Castle took it so seriously that he actually remained in seclusion for several years. Like that's how fucking terrified he was after he made the movie. Which might be why before that he only made light, silly, scary movies. Just, you know, random fun facts on that. But yeah, they did make a sequel. It was a made-for-TV movie, and I often wonder if maybe I had seen that, and that's where the baby eye thing came in. But I don't really remember if I did. And it was "Look What Happened to Rosemary's Baby," and it came out like sometime in the 70s. So 3-4 years later, I don't remember how many years later. And what is a new movie that's coming up? Apartment 7A is rumored to be a prequel to Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah.
So those are things worth looking into, but being warned about. Because yeah, I'm sure if they're doing a prequel that maybe it'll line up all the abuse that perhaps Rosemary took to lead her to. Because the thing about gaslighting is you kind of get groomed into it.
It starts small.
Yeah,
and it start with how your parents tell you you're being too excited or dramatic, or you know, something that happened didn't happen. Are you sure you're remembering it the right way? Like it doesn't have to be a parent, but if some authority figure starts doing this, and it's not necessarily started maliciously, but the impact ends up being very malicious.
The background things that you see with her at the convent school that she obviously went to. She obviously went to some kind of a Catholic school.
Private school that may have been.
I didn't mean to tell them about the windows, and now they're boarding them up.
Yeah, and also something about now we're banned from the competition or the concert.
Now we're banned from the competition. So it sounds like previously, even through like Catholicism, which
shock of all shocks.
Yeah. She's been gaslit in the past and was basically primed to be gaslit again. It's just not something new for her to be blamed for things that aren't her fault, to be told, well, it's your fault this is happening. This is all because of you.
Yeah.
So it's not comfortable, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So things that I'd like you guys to talk about a little bit, if you don't mind. Betsy, you brought up a good point that I never thought of before when we were talking outside of the podcast about whether or not Guy might have been living off of Rosemary's money herself if she had been independently wealthy, and that might have been why he leached onto her to begin with.
There were just a couple of things that made me think that. The one was they were buying an apartment that seemed like it was out of their means. And when they were talking about it, like walking down the street talking about it. She's like, that was nicer than the last one. He's like, yeah, and like twice the price. And she said, yeah, but let's get it. And he goes, okay. So as long as we can get out of our lease, we'll get it. So it was kind of her decision that they take this apartment. Which made me think, I wonder if this is her money that we're working with. And so he feels like he kind of has to acquiesce to her because they're working with her money, because his money isn't, he doesn't have as much money. This is one of the things. And then there were a couple other little things, like the way they were redoing the entire apartment for a family starting out. Like he didn't even want to have kids, and they're redoing this entire apartment, like redoing the apartment, which is not a cheap thing to do. Painting all the walls, having crews come in and paint the walls, doing all of this stuff. Now, some of it she was doing by hand, but some of it was obviously being done by other people. So it just felt like there was more money there than it seemed like they were represented to have, which is why I thought maybe she had like a trust fund or something sitting there that they were using beforehand. And then once he started to bring the money in, then it started to, he was still in control, but I think that it was like he was in control, but also knew that it wasn't his money, which is why he wasn't very happy. There were just a couple things that struck me that there might have been money there to begin with, especially in the early bits of it. That she's like, why can't we have a baby? And he's like, because I don't make enough money. And she's kind of like, but I have the money, we can do this. So then when he finally was like, I give us permission to have this baby because I've had a job that pays like I want it to. And she's like, finally, okay. And then it just kind of switches there. Once he's making enough money, you can see where he starts to get more self-assured. Yeah.
So we don't have an answer to this. It's not in the book. Yeah. It's not in your
No.
It was a theory that I never thought about. I'm not sure about it myself. I'm like, not to debate, but like I had always assumed she was poor because she came from a large Catholic family. And just from traditional stereotyping, that's usually not a lot of money there. I don't know that her parents were dead. She had like several other siblings she didn't really talk to. So, but there's a definite question of then, even though Guy was a working actor, he was not wealthy. He was not well known. He was not famous. He had work and it seemed fairly steady, but it was not mainstream big work. He was not the big name. He had TV, radio ads, that kind of thing. So there's a definite question of where the fuck did this money come from? A answer to that might be that somehow Rosemary had wealth of her own.
Yeah.
But clearly she didn't feel she had enough access to leave, but you did see, which this happens a lot, like, well, not happens a lot, but often you hear about like back in the day when women's role was simply the housewife and did not have jobs. Keeping in mind, you couldn't get credit cards, you didn't really have bank accounts in your own name at this point in time. Like you were under either your parents or you were under your husband. Like your money went to them. You had an account with them. They could close it with or without your permission, regardless if your name was on it. You could, a lot of places you cannot even buy a house apartment without a male signing for you. So keep this in mind. So a lot of women would stash money from the household budget in case of emergency where they need to run. And you do see a scene where she pulls out money that's been hidden away when she goes to run to call Dr. Hill. But it's a lot of money, as Betsy pointed out. So where did the money come from? An answer could have been somehow she had wealth on her own somehow.
Right.
So
we couldn't find a good answer to it, but
I just pretty much passed the money. Where is their money coming from? And the price of the apartment is irrelevant to me because I was like, oh, is it? It doesn't seem related to any parts of the plot, I guess.
It's just interesting. It's an interesting question.
I passed it. It is. I passed it off as like, whoosh, movie magic. Look at this place they could afford.
Yeah. And then it could have just been that poor writing in both the book and in the movie. This is another answer. They just magic happened. There you go. But also, Rebecca, you had a wonderful point where you were thinking there might have been a commentary on capitalism, if you want to
possibly. Just the aside from the major themes of isolation, losing control, not
abuse, rape,
the power of yourself, is it a condemnation of capitalism? He's willing to drag his family through all this shit to get what he views as his rightful fame and fortune.
Drag his family through, sell his wife, shall we say?
Yeah.
And his child.
Yep.
Though I guess not his child.
You're right. There's no DNA of his involved.
But yeah. So There's a lot going on in this movie. I hate this movie, not because it's a bad movie, but because it's all too realistic, despite the Satan and Satan's baby bit of it.
And that's the real horror aspect of it now, isn't it?
But if you can sit through it, and if you're a woman, have a friend. If you've ever, actually, aside from that, if you have ever been abused, raped, hurt, assaulted, regardless of what gender you are, or if you don't subscribe to either, have a friend. This is very triggering, as Betsy pointed out at the beginning. If you're a guy, or again, another gender you subscribe to and have not had to experience any of this abuse, assault, rape, one, I'm so happy for you in all reality. If you've never had to experience anything like this, I'm so happy for you. If you had to experience anything like this, know that you're not alone. But if you've never experienced anything like this, and we're talking and you don't understand what's so horrifying, and that's not a condemnation of you. There's a lot you can't understand if you've never been through it. This might help you be more empathic and have a feeling for it, but realize what you're going to be putting yourself through, because it's trauma. And also realize that a horrible human being directed this movie. So, yeah.
Yeah, generally not a great guy.
Agree.
So with that, this has been Girls Ghosts Ghouls. I'm Jenny.
I'm Rebecca.
And Betsy.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
You have been listening to the Girls Ghost Schools podcast. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Girls Ghost Schools podcast, on Twitter at Girls Ghost Pod. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Girls Ghost Schools podcast, and find our podcast on your favorite podcatcher.